Okay guys, so in our last installment in this ISU tutorial, we're going to work on the home screen. So I'll take you back to the original question here, and you can just see it over here. So when the game first starts, rather than showing a question, we're going to show this big image instead and a button that says start game. And then when we hit the start game, then the question will appear. So how do we do that? Like, how do we get different screens in pApplets? Well, there's different techniques we can use, and based on the limited amount of time we had to learn these things, the best approach I can suggest is that we basically, everything that we've made here, we're going to hide it initially so we don't even see any of it, and rather we're just going to show these two things. And when we click on this button, then these two things will hide and all of this will show, and then we can commence the playing of our game. Alright, so that's the basic strategy we're going to do. The code isn't that hard for this, and I'll kind of go through it. So first thing we got to do is create another image to hold this big starting image here, and this is part of what you can download in the zip file. And then we need an extra button. Okay, so let's start with that at the very top up here. Alright, so we have our next button, and I've made a bit of room here already. I'm going to add a start button and a p image, which I'm going to call home. Alright, so down to startup we're going to go, and we're going to create the start button, and we're going to create the image home, load the image home, I guess. So down in setup here, I guess right above the next button, like after we load the images, we're going to create this other load image for home, and then we're going to create our start button. So just like the next button, we're going to create a new G button, and then it's going to say click here to begin. Alright, so we've got the two extra things we need, but now we got to go through the process of hiding everything. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to hide is this next button. So if you want to hide something, guys, you're going to go .set visible to false on that thing. So for example, next button .set visible false will hide the next button. Now, what about these labels and all these options here? Well, one way we can do it, like in the make label and the make option methods that I've wrote, we can set these up, or we can sort of hack into them a bit, and as we make it we can set them to visible false to begin with by default, and then we can turn them on later. So rather than setting visible false up here, I'm going to go down to make label and make option and do it down there, so it automatically becomes invisible as it's being made. So let's go down there really quick and we will look at that. Alright, so even though this is code I've given you, you're free to come in and mess around with it a bit if you want to. So for example, like I'm using this Comic Sans MS, but you may want to use a different font for all these things. Alright, so I've made a little bit of room here. Now watch, like in make option and in make label, I'm going to go like set visible false, and down here I'm going to say x option dot set visible false. Alright, so x label and x option, these are just things I made, and they basically represent a new option or a new label. Okay, and then I do all the things I need to do to it, and then I return it, and then it gets assigned to whatever is making the label at the time. Right, so for example, like if I go up to where I make a label, which is way back up here, so Q label equals make label. Okay, so then all that code gets run and it gets assigned to Q label, including the fact now that it's invisible. Alright, so that actually saves us a lot of time. So that's going to solve the problem of hiding everything. Alright, so at some point, guys, we want to have like another method to start the game, and then we're going to connect that method to the start button. Alright, but let's do the method first, then we'll connect it to start button later. So if I just come down here, I guess just down above set question, we're going to create a method called start game. So it's a public void start game. And basically all this method does, guys, is it just turns everything to visible and hides the initial image and the initial button. Alright, so it looks like this. I'm going to open it up a little bit here. So we're going to set visible to the start button. Alright, we're going to set invisible, or set visible false, to sorry, let me try that again. We're going to set visible false to start button, because we don't want to see it anymore. We're going to set visible true to next button, because we now want to see it. Okay, now I got to go through and systematically turn everything back on. So I can use a for loop to go to all my options and turn those back on. And then I've got 3 labels which also have to be turned on to true as well. So there's the Q label, R label, and W label. So I realize I went through that pretty quickly, but it's basically just setting visible, true, false for everything. I also want to, I don't have to worry about the image. I'll show you how to do the image in a second. But that's it for that. And then I should also at this point start the game, or use this option in start game to call the next question or set the first question. All right, so start game is going to do set question instead, because we don't want to call set question until we're starting the game. So this would be a better place to put it rather than in the startup method. All right, so I'll take it out of startup at the end, and you can see how that works. All right, so what are we going to do next? Well, maybe we can connect start game to the button. Okay, so if we come back up here to mouse pressed, okay, so we're already writing code if we hit the next button. So maybe like we'll make some room here, and right in this little gap here, we'll do like if we hit the start button. Okay, so if we hit the start button, then we're going to start the game. Okay, and that's going to run the code for start game. It's going to hide a couple things, and it's going to show a bunch of things, and then the game starts. All right, so the only thing we haven't taken care of yet is the image. So down at the bottom here, we've got part of that already, right? So we're already saying down here in draw, where's draw? Here it is. If qnum greater or equal to 1, then we're going to draw the image for that question. Okay, all we have to do, guys, is add, because if we're not on qnum 1, that means, or 0, that means we're at the start of the game. So we're going to say, like else, draw the home image instead. All right, so in draw, it's going to make a decision. Do I draw the home image, or do I draw one of the questions images instead, right? And we already covered, if qnum changes, this image will change to another image, right? But if I'm not on a question yet, in other words, qnum is right now -1, then it's going to just draw the home image instead. All right, and that's it. So that's how draw is going to decide which image to draw at what point in the game. All right, and when we first load up, everything's invisible except the home image and that start button. Right, so all we can click on is the start button at the very top here. Right, so I'll just come back up here. So start button's the only thing that's visible. So we're going to click on it, and then when we click, it's going to go to mouse pressed, and it's going to see I've hit that button. It's going to run start game code. So in start game, we're going to hide that button, make everything else true to see, and then set question's going to kick in, and it's going to advance qnum to 0 for the first question, causing draw to no longer draw the home image, and it'll start drawing one of the question images instead. All right, so that's basically it. That's the entire thing. The only thing I've got left to do is up here in in the startup method, way at the top here, or setup. I no longer want to call start game. Did I take that out already? Okay, I must have taken that out. Okay, so I think yours had start game up here, but it shouldn't. So make sure you take that out. Actually, yeah, so it's gone. Okay, so just take it out of there. And then we're good to go. So let's just compile this, and I will run it one more time and make sure that we've got a complete working game here. Okay, so there it is. Now I notice it's a little wider than it needs to be for this particular image, so I'm a little bit of a fussy guy that way. I like everything to look as good as it can. So I can just quickly change the size up here. I forgot to do that, so this should maybe be 600. Okay, but of course you can adjust yours to be any size you want to, as long as it fits on one screen. It can be as big and wide as you need it to be for your own purposes. All right, so this should look a little bit better, but you notice that the startup screen did come up. Okay, so instead of going to the first question, it comes here first, and click here to begin. So as soon as I do this, it takes me to my first question, and then everything else runs the same way that it did before. Okay, now one thing I didn't have time to put in, but I'm going to leave for you as maybe a challenge, is at the end, I'm sort of underwhelmed by how this game finishes right now, because we're basically done the tutorial for my mock ISU here. And I'll kind of tell you what needs to be done. Okay, so game over, and that's it. And then it just ends the game, okay, after 5 questions. All right, but maybe rather than that, you could have another image at the end that says game over or something like that, if you are so inclined to figure out how to do that, using the same kind of technique I use for the opening screen. All right, so that's it, guys. So where does that leave you? Because that's basically the working code for a basic ISU. Okay, so from here, what you would need to do, obviously, is you're going to change these to your own questions, maybe using the same format that I've got here. You're obviously going to use, and have more, like have 15 questions. You're going to have like 15 images, because I want every question to have an image of some kind related to that question. So you're going to have a list of like 15 of these here. Obviously, this is going to be growing to 15 as well, because you have more images, right? When you go to a new question, down here, instead of qnum equaling 4, you're going to let it get as high as like 14. or say 19 if you've got 20 questions, or whatever number you have, right? You're going to go one less than that. So you're going to change a few things around, but basically you can use this as sort of a starting template, okay? I'd also encourage you to change the colors, maybe change the fonts, maybe even change the layout of this thing. Maybe have your options listed all on one side or all along the bottom, or however you want to do it. Like, try to make it your own so that it's a little different than what I've given you here. So the more different you can make it, the better. But I've given you the hard parts of the code here to do already, guys. And that's it, okay? This is your final assignment of the year, but this is your ISU. So obviously it goes into that different 30% category. So I want you to take your time and do a decent job on this. And then when you're done, you're going to basically zip this entire project up with the images, and you're going to send it to me. Not this project, not the Pokemon project, but your very own project that's, you know, based on the logic of what we've learned in this, you know, mock ISU tutorial. All right, and as always, I'm available for questions on email or on chat in our weekly chats. I'm going to give you 2 weeks to do this. Okay, so this is my last lesson. Next week there won't be a video, but next week is still a week that you can work on this. Okay, and I will open up the chat on those scheduled days as well, so that in case you have questions, you can always reach me live that way, or always by email as well. All right, and then it's going to be due at the end of the second week of June. Okay, so whatever date that is, I'm not sure. Okay, but sometime around, say, June 14th, 15th, that first weekend or that second weekend in June is I think when we have to have things wrapped up. All right, so good luck, guys. Have a bit of fun with this. Pick a category or a topic that interests you to make it more fun, and I hope you all do a good job on this. Okay, and I'll talk to you later.